Halo, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back with me, Mr. Sams, in our videos for English lessons to all my students in vocational school SMK Taruna Padang Sidimpuan. And in this video, maybe this is our last Materi for our semester. So this is the part ones for talking about a narrative text. My beloved students, exactly, it's not so hard if we want to talking about narrative text because narrative text is some of imaginations or talking about imaginations. Okay, so in this video we will talk much for this topic about narrative. Okay, so give me your eyes. Well, my lovely students, talking about narratives text, automatically there is some points that we need to know much about. Okay, so for the first, what are they? The first is the meaning of narrative. Of course, before we go further to talking about narrative, we need to know what is the meaning of narrative. Okay, and then we have to know about the generic structure of narrative. Then, what about the language? We have to understand about the language features in narrative and also the kinds of narratives text. So this is what we are to talking about in this video. What is a narrative text? My beloved student, narrative text is a kind of text and talking about fictions and its imaginative story to entertain people. Listens, this is a kind of text and talking about fictions. Talking about fictions, it means unreal. Okay? And the purpose of the narrative text is just to entertain the people, to entertain the readers. Okay? So, narrative text is defined to some of parts, to some of kinds in the text. For examples, sometimes we divide it into the story or in a song or a poem. If the narrative text talking about a story, it means we're talking about fable. What's fable? Myth, legends, folktale, fairy tales, love story, mystery, and horror. This is the kinds of narrative text in writings of a story, like a story. So it's not means that it is a story. Okay, seems have the similars with a story, but this is not a story. Okay, now narrative text, remember, we are talking about unreal actions. Talking about unreal actions. This is just an imaginary of someone's, of the writer maybe. Okay, and then how about the generic structure that we have to discuss in this video? Okay, listen. Narrative text is an imaginations that improved by someone's maybe they using in a what we call, they make it like in a writer, in a writings. Okay, so most of the narratives is glowings or bloomings in our life, in our social life. This is usually we see in a part of some paper, or maybe a books or a novel. Okay, and some of them we can see it by like sounds, for examples, we see the narratives for kinds like songs. So it means the narratives text talking about, or we hear by hearings a voice. So about the short story is talking about writing, and songs or poetry, maybe some of poetry also we can see it's by a voice. So not almost the narratives we see in the kinds of writer. Okay, so here, to help you, to all of my students, to help you to more understand about generic structures, there is 4 options here I met to help you. For the first thing is we're talking about orientations. So this is the part of how to write a narrative text, right? What is the first things that you have to know if you're talking about narrative text? The first is about orientations. And now, what is orientations? Orientations is just the openings of the story. Okay? So, listen to me carefully. Narrative text, we're talking about narrative text. So, we have to know, we have to understand how to write narrative text. And there is 4 points of a narrative text. Even though the narrative text as fable, myth, legend, folktale, and so on, there is 4 general structures that you have to know, because if you don't understand about it, so maybe your story is not completed, or is not entertained for the readers about your narrative text. Okay, so the first thing is about orientations. What is orientation? Orientation is opening up the story or introductions of the place, who, when, and the actors. Okay, so this is the first thing that you have to know about narrative text. Even though in a fable, of course, the fable must have the opening. It must has talking about a place, talking about who and when, and also talking about the title. Okay, this is, we call orientations as the generic structures of writings narrative text. Okay, and the second, what? The second is narrative text. Of course, 100% the part of the story you have to put a resolutions after orientations. So what is resolutions? A resolution is the part of story, or the part of story or the narrative text in solving of the climax or determining sad or happy ending. Okay, listen. Narrative text have 4 generic structure. The first is orientations, okay, and the second is resolutions. Orientation is as introductions, opening of the story, okay, and in this opening you're talking about the place of the story, where happens it take, and also you're talking about who, talking about the times, and then you're talking about resolutions up there, or the orientations, and in this resolutions is the importance point in narrative text. Why? Because in this narrative text, the resolutions is the part of the story that's talking about the higher dialogues, or the climax of the story. Is talking about what? Maybe if you are talking about love story, so in this part, in this resolutions part, this is, you make the story maybe about the sadness. So this is the underlines, this is the underlines story of your narrative text, okay. And then after you finish about talking about resolutions, you have to go to optional. What is optionals? Optional is the part of the text which talking about the aim of the story, okay. Looks optional, part of the text which talking about the aim of the story. What is the aim of the story? A purpose. Of course, every story, or every narrative story in the kinds of text, okay, in the kind of text, it's always keep an aim or a purpose to the readers, exactly what is talking about, okay. So you have to be able to analyze this, that what is the narratives exactly want to say to the readers. So this is the part of in optionals part, okay. And then for the last, the complications. The complication is the part of the story begin to rise to the climax, okay. This is about the part of the story begin to rise to the climax. It's look like a summary of that you put from the narratives, the narrative text, okay. So listen, in this video I ask you to talking about a narrative text, but we discuss is about how to write, not to analyzing, okay. We are talking about how to write a narrative text and not to analyzing before. Why? Because speaks about analyzing a narrative text, maybe we have to talk it in the next video, and we are not text about the all of the kinds of narrative text. We just talking about poem and songs for analyzing, okay. And in this video we are not talking about analyzing, but we are talking about how writing a narrative text and how to know, okay, how to know about narrative text. So this is the understanding of a narrative text, and this is the characteristic of narrative text. What are they? Here we're talking about what is, and also we're talking about the kinds of, and then we're talking about the generic structures. All of what I talk about is about the characteristics of narrative text, okay. Next, This is the last what we have to talk about a narrative text. What is a language feature? My beloved students, language features is the most important that you have to know if you want to write a narrative story, or if you want to analyzing about narrative text. Again, in this video, we are not talking about analyzing, but we are focused on writings or making a narrative text. So this is not so specific. In this, in the next video, we are talk about. We talk more specifically about the narratives in what we call in English. We're talking about a poem and a song. We are not talking about fairy tales. We are not talking about short story. We are not talking about love story. But we are talking about songs and poem for our next video. So, for the last, this is we're talking about language feature. So, the language feature that used in narrative text is, what is the first one? Past tense. Again, and again, I say to all of my students that start from the first years, I always say to you that you have to improve your English by knowing the basic. What is the basic? The basic is about learning tense. Okay, learning about tense. Look, in this video, in this Materi, our Materi about narrative, again, we talk about past tense. Okay, and then what are the language feature that used in a narrative text? Adverb of time. I remind you more. In the first class, in the second class, you have learnings about adverb of time, adverb of place. Okay? And again, we use in narrative text about adverb of time. So, I'm so sorry to all of my students. I don't have enough times to explain back about past tense and adverb of time. Okay? So, you have to find about it by yourself. What is the third point in language feature that used in a narrative text? Is about time conjunctions. Talking about conjunctions every day. Talking about conjunction. If I'm not mistaken, so I always say to you, maybe 100 times every sentences, even though you put in a paragraph, in a descriptive text, in a narrative text, or daily speech every day, conjunctions is really related to every sentences. You can spare it away. No. Okay? So you have to remember about conjunctions. And in this narrative text, we use a time conjunctions as the language features. What else? Talking about actions verb. Hello to all of my students. Still remember what what words is the actions verb. Okay? Forget it? I hope no. Okay? Actions verb. We use action verbs as language features in a narrative text. Then, specific character. Specific character. Specific character also very important in a narrative text. 7. Direct speech. Direct speech. In our last video, we have talking about direct, indirect speech. So, right? Yes. So, if you still forget about direct speech, I suppose you to watch again our last video about direct, indirect speech. Okay? Why? Because in narrative text, the direct speech is really needs in the writings of the story, in a fairy tale, in a legends, in a love story. The direct speech is needed. Okay, so you have to learn again about direct speech. Just watch my video, our lessons about direct and indirect speech in a few videos in the past. Okay, and what is the last point of language features that we use for writing a narrative text? Thinking verb. Sorry sir, what is the thinking verbs? You don't know about thinking verbs? We also talking about verb. Action verb, thinking verb, we have learned it. So, this is why I said to you, don't ever forget what our lessons when you was in the first class and in the second class, because all of these grammars that you are learning, we will learn in the third class, but in a different way, not in the same way. We will learn in a text. Okay, so don't forget about the language feature. There's 7. So there's 7 points of the language features that really needed in the writings of a narrative text. And what we will discuss more specifically about the narrative is we are talking about song and poems in our next video. So keep watching my video and thank you for listening our lessons. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.